Hey folks, I want to talk to you a little bit this morning with a good friend of mine, Carl Lacey. And over time, Carl and I have talked about our different experiences with discrimination and segregation. And Carl and I, we talked about when I was a boy, how I lived in one of the most, I would say, prejudiced parts of the country. And up until the 1990s, they had a very active KKK organization in that county and actually grown. And it's been noted in national news as having a very significant race relations problem, let's put it that way. So, Carl, you and I have shared some very interesting conversations about that. You want to talk a little bit about, of course, we know you're a community activist, you're involved with a lot of things here in Chaska. You serve on the Planning Commission for the city. You lead one of our great community efforts here in helping young folks and veterans and that kind of thing. But you didn't grow up here in Chaska. You grew up in...
I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you know the South, I grew up during a time of segregation. Integration came when I was 14 years old. I always went to segregated school. The first time I ever went to school with whites was in college. So, growing up in the South, even though our community was segregated, Atlanta was a little bit different because it was the capital city. I grew up in a town that had 6 historically black colleges and universities. So there's Atlanta, and then there's the rest of Georgia. But the sting of segregation did not escape me. I remember having to go to the back of the bus. I remember the day when we were able to sit in the front of the bus, and I don't think I ever took a seat in the back after that.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the feelings that, I try to imagine that. I've been to the Rosa Parks Museum. We've been at the bridge, of course, with Dr. King, where John Lewis encountered racism. But tell me about, because it takes a little bit of courage, and yes, the law changed. What's the feeling when you first have to step across that threshold where you break down the barrier?
It was very different. I can remember as a child, as a 4 or 5-year-old, going downtown with my mother one Saturday. And going downtown, everything good and classy was downtown. There were no malls. Everything was downtown. And as we started to get on the bus, a white woman had just risen from her seat in the front of the bus and was getting down. And my mother had her foot on the front steps. And this bus driver literally cursed my mother out. I'd never heard anyone in my young life say a curse word towards my mother. So it was a new experience. And he was yelling at her and saying things like, I know you're a school teacher, I know the superintendent, and I can get you fired. And I remember the dignity of my mother that day as she stepped back and told me, the woman got off the bus, we got on the bus, and proceeded to go downtown. But that one experience has stuck with me my whole life. So fast forward to when it was legal for me to sit in the front, I never gave up that seat. I also remember water fountains, colored and white water fountains. At a young age, I thought that colored water fountain was where you would get the rust-colored water coming out of pipes. And we didn't have those in our house. So I was accustomed, I thought white water was the water just like in my house. But within the black community, as within many black communities around the country, these were strong communities. I came to find out that things that we would see represented on TV, movies, we had similar things in the black community. Church was the center of activity, social activity centered around the church. They would have, the women would have fancy teas, the women would have, people would have bridge parties. My mother would entertain the bridge club. So we didn't really recognize living in Atlanta, except when we ventured out in public and outside of our community, that we were in this unequal situation. All of the politicians were white. I remember the first time an African American was elected to an office. It was a huge deal. I mean, it was the first time Atlanta elected a black mayor. It was a big deal.
Andrew Young, right?
Maynard Jackson.
Oh, that's right, Maynard Jackson.
Maynard Jackson. In fact, at my parents' home, the congressman who preceded Andrew Young, Charles Welker, had his neighborhood meeting at my parents' home. Following that, Andrew Young, when he decided to run for mayor, had their meeting in our neighborhood at my parents' home, as did John Lewis. And
I was going to ask about John Lewis. Yes.
John Lewis and my parents, and the Young, were friends. This was this insulated community that we were segregated, but we had one hotel, we had one restaurant, nice, what we call a tablecloth restaurant, that people would go to, but people were happy. When integration came and some of the venues downtown would open, then people started going to the Hyatt and the various hotels, and that's when what we knew, that insulated comfort we need, broke apart. And that I remember.
So, Carl, I'd love to talk to you for hours about this, and I have spoken to you about this, and we talked about my experiences, of course, my hero, Roberto Clemente, and of course the segregation in Fort Myers that went on in the 50s and the 60s and even into the 70s. And of course, many of us in Minnesota have been to Fort Myers, and it's a wonderful town now. But for the things that went on there, that Roberto experience was very sad, and I often reflect on that. But let's move forward here to your experiences here in Carver County and in Chaska, and what has happened here, and maybe talk about what you'd like to see happen, or maybe some different priorities.
My wife Burnett and I have been here since 2008, so we've been here 12 years, and we actually followed our oldest son and his family. They just built a house in Clover Ridge, and we were downsizing, and we purchased a condo right around the corner. The city, the area has become increasingly more diverse My first time being in Chaska was bringing our then 16-year-old son out to take his driver's license test. We lived in Tonka Bay at the time, and I got to Chaska by going all the way up 7 to 494 to 5 down to Chaska, and later on I found that 41 would have gotten me here a lot quicker. But the town, it's been a very good experience for us. We came here 29 years ago from Atlanta, and we lived in Minnetonka, Tonka Bay, the Lake Minnetonka area, and here in Chaska. And it's been a wonderful town. It's been very easy to get back involved in volunteering and community work, which I love. The community center is a treasure, and kudos to our Parks and Rec, which I tell them all the time, that department runs like a city 3 times this size. So we've enjoyed it here. Over the years, we've noticed that diversity is starting to become a much more diverse city, which is a very, very good thing. And I'd like to see the city continue to grow and become even more comfortable with that diversity. This whole region is growing. The whole southwest corridor is growing. And when the light railhead comes to Eden Prairie, it's going to make living out here even more attractive to people that work throughout the metro area.
So do you think, we have disparities, we have wealth disparities, even in Carver County, we have employment disparities. And so you've dealt with these issues in the past. Do you think can you bring us some experiences that you had that maybe help us deal with these issues better here in Carver County?
One of the main things that attack misperception is communication. And I know earlier this year there were a couple of events, Marinita's Table, which I applaud the city for welcoming that type of event. I think the community center, having a place that is welcoming to all residents, is important. Because if you don't know, or when you know, you do better. When you know someone, you're not as quick to build false narratives or false perceptions around interacting with that person.
So I think engagement is the key.
Engagement is always the key. You and I know the first time we met was on the Veterans Park Task Force. And I was very honored. I'm not a veteran, but representing the community, I appreciated the opportunity to engage, and that's where we got to meet. And I saw the level of attention that the city administration and all of the stakeholders that were invited to that. And I was a civilian, but I was still invited to weigh in, and I thought that was so appropriate. And I applaud how that transpired, and we have this beautiful destination place that rightly honors people who have dedicated their time, their vulnerability, to serve this country. My parents were veterans, and lot of times.
You've told me that story. That's
Well, they met in the Army at Fort Benning. They had both graduated college, and that was their next step after getting their diplomas. And they got married while at Fort Benning.
So, Carl, first of all, I want to thank you for serving on that committee. And I think that committee worked very hard with our partners, and we found a way to respectfully honor our veterans and provide a place for people to go who care about veterans and for veterans to reflect. And I think if you venture up there, and I encourage you to stop by Veterans Park in Chaska across from the VFW, it is certainly a place where you can reflect.
The one thing that was so impressive about that, and this is from the veterans who were serving, I know the VFW, the American Legion, and there were other veterans that came from other stakeholders. They said, we don't want a surplus tank or helicopter. We want a place that is inviting to families, and for reunion, for memorial services, and the integration of the archery course, that brings community together. Everything about this park, I know we've been affected by COVID this year, but the concerts in the park, the community center, Fireman's Park, all of the parks around here, the farmers market. This is the type of environment that helps communities grow. It attracts people
of diversity, and for folks of diversity, of color, to feel comfortable in our community.
To feel comfortable, and as the company, Chaska has quite a commercial and industrial base, and I would say to all of these companies that your growth, your future is in expanding your vision to welcome all people. You never know where the next genius or business strategist or marketer is going to come from. And to double up on that, education becomes the future.
You want to talk about equity a little bit?
Yes.
Take a little bit of time, because I know it's too close to your heart. Education is, I know.
Education is very important, and if you have ownership or have a stake in it, then you will take care of it. Several years ago, over a couple of decades ago, an experiment was tried at one of the housing projects in Chicago. People were tenants, but then they found a way to get people ownership of their units.
Was that Speed or Mayor Bird, Jane, right?
I'm trying to think. It was, yes. An amazing thing happened. Now that I own part of it, I want to take care of it. Now, if you should want to take care of things anyway. It's not a prerequisite to being mindful of things.
But families in crisis, they have different priorities. And, if you're trying to make sure your children are safe and they're housed and they're protected from whatever elements out there that can be a problem, some of the things you're talking about and taking care of some of the things in the community, that's not necessarily a priority. So, like you're saying, the ownership.
You take ownership. One of the things that comes up a lot, and schools here are very good, but whenever bond issues are to improve the school. I've often heard, I remember in another community we lived in, there was a bond issue for the school, and I heard people that were retired, kids growing up like I am now. Well, I don't have any kids in the school, so why would I want to increase my taxes? Well, that kid, that loyal girl, who benefits from those extra microscopes or computer labs, may be the doctor, the EMT, or the nurse that saved your life at some point in the future when you pass out in cup food. So there you have it.
We don't want you to be afraid to go to Cubs food.
No, I'm using that.
I know. I'm only, we're having more fun with it.
But we think it does not involve us. It's all connected. There's no way to escape the dot connecting that we live in on this planet.
We're all in it together.
There's no escaping it, and you can think about it and try to game it out the other way, and reality always wins.
Well, we're running a little short on time.
Yep.
So is there a wrap up or something that you want to leave people with to remember about diversity in your journey, or to bring some hope that some of the disparities in Carver County can be, we can close the gap?
Well, the one thing I would say to anyone listening is to not be afraid of what you don't know. Learn what it is first, and then make that determination.
And act appropriately.
We don't appreciate everyone's sensibilities, but this community, I was glad to see the community respond to the incidents that happened at the high school a couple years back. I was glad to see the police department respond to incidents some years back, and our community will continue to be great and will be even greater as we continue on this path of inclusion and welcoming diversity.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking a little time to talk to me this morning.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This morning we're talking with my good friend Carl Lacey and some of his experiences and observations. And I think in Carver County we need to continue to work on the disparities that occur for folks of color, make sure that they have the greatest opportunities they could possibly have for employment and education, and a good place for them to raise their families. Thank you, folks, for looking in at what we had to say today.